like different
Yeah, you kind
concepts.
of had an
Yeah.
idea for like putting together some kind of comic with like a classic adventuring party,
Mhm.
like kind of a D&D style group going out on adventures and quests, and you had all
Yeah.
these different character ideas and I would sketch them up and
Yeah, we were talking about a bunch of different concepts, and then Trisha was like, "Well, I kind of want to do something fantasy." I was like, "Oh, fantasy!" Like we were taking like a long time to go through different concepts, and I was like, "Well, just give me an hour." It's just like I can do fantasy, like yeah, that's that like I exhale fantasy. I guess the process was I came up with a bunch of different potential party like layouts of different classes, and um and then I was like thinking I had different like rosters, and then like kind of how they would interact with each other and like what role they would have, because like the most important is that everyone kind of contributes in a fight. But I my design like idea for the characters was they should have a role in combat, obviously, that doesn't infringe on someone else's role too much, and then take the same principle to their out of combat utility. So, like, druids can help with plants, etc. And then I wanted their personalities to try and do the same thing, as well as their area of expertise. They should all have unique areas of expertise, and then they can overlap a little bit, but not too much. And that was like my idea. I wanted them all to be well rounded enough and have enough flaws that they could all kind of overlap with each other and sort of weave together as a party. And once I had the party figured out, then I was like, well, that's easy. It's just like running a session.
That's when D&D works the best for me in a way, is when you have one character is lacking something, but the other person has it. And it's that balance. And that's where the comedy comes in too, because
Yeah.
you're troubleshooting and you're problem solving and you're all horribly flawed, yet
Yeah.
you feel something.
It's It's why I don't mind power gaming as long as they're min maxing. Like min maxing is when you make yourself horrible at something.
Yeah,
Like you be like mentally challenged barbarian that's super
yeah.
super strong.
But that's
Like
fun.
right.
That's the most fun.
yeah,
I think
yeah.
anyway.
If you have people min max all the different things, it's great. If you have a party that everyone is super strong and dumb, then you have a comedy routine.
Like, so you had written before. You're a writer. You write fantasy work
Mhm.
primarily, right?
Yeah,
I'm guessing. And
yeah.
so, did you write the entire script and then hand it over and say, "Here you go. Here's."
Um, Not the entire script.
It required a bit of tweaking. Like it was
Yeah,
kind of a loose script when he came up with it, and there, as I was like sketching it out, I'm like mentioning certain things that like
yeah,
are confusing in the script or that might not
yeah.
work as well. And
It took a bit to figure out what format of script like translates into a comic. So like there was a process of Trisha teaching me to write comics. So like because like certain stuff doesn't work or whatever. Can't even remember what you were teaching me, but I just remember there was a certain education process. Like I would give some stuff, and then Trisha would like explain how it has to be written so it's like more clear, or like how like certain things don't work in a comic, etc.
So is it a one and done story, or is this just and there's going to be spin off? I mean, I guess you could spin off forever, right?
Yeah.
yeah, it's a contained story, but I always like all my stories kind of end open ended, just in case
Mm.
you wanted to continue it. So that's kind of how it is. It's like open ended, but it's its own contained story.
Yeah, like they finished the quest, but like there's nothing more open-ended than an adventuring party because they could just go on another adventure.
Exactly. Yeah.
But that's really
And
smart.
I'd love to do more.
Have it contained, because then you're not. I've made this mistake of like, just you bite off way more than you can chew. And it's like, oh, no problem. I'll commit 20 years to this. And it's like, that's dumb. Don't do that. Like it's way better. Also from a kind of a reader point of view, it's so much more accessible because you're not waiting around for all this other stuff to come. You can just get it, enjoy it, and punch in and punch out if you want. Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
much better. It's a smart idea. It's a way to go, I guess, especially with like doing something all yourself. It's tough to do everything yourself. So is it just you two that are the creative team behind it? It's writer guy, artist girl, and that's it? Is
Basically, yeah.
Who's doing the lettering then?
I'm doing the lettering.
Okay, you're doing okay, cool. What are your influences, or what got you going, or what were the little sparks that got you stoked about drawing, and especially drawing comics? Why did you decide to do this crazy idea of getting into drawing comics?
Oh, kind of similar to your story, but also like a lot of people who are in comics right now, their stories is like they started off in animation and then twiddled down to comics. And that was kind of like where I was at. I fell in love with animation when I was a kid. And, I read comics, of course, as well. But I was going to go to college specifically for animation, ended up not going through with the full degree. And mostly just because it was just heading in a direction that I didn't want to go with animation. And especially looking at the cartoons that are on TV right now, I'm almost somewhat glad I didn't go that route. And
Yeah.
then I ended up doing comics instead, and it ended up being the better path for me overall. So a lot of my inspiration are obviously taken from like manga because that's where a lot of the content is coming from, especially since they're just always busting out new series. Like it's crazy the amount of output that's coming from Japan, and especially when you're looking for fantasy stuff like what we're doing here, you can find so much fantasy from Japan, but a lot of it tends to be like isekais going into the fantasy world from the modern world. And those are interesting too, but maybe a little bit oversaturated in that specific type of fantasy.
Yeah.
So it was really good to be able to do something a little bit more classic.
Yeah. It's like I don't mind it. Like I don't mind isekais, but it's kind of, I guess a good analogy would be like if there was only pirate metal, like if there was only different versions of Ailstorm, then it would be like, all right, come on.
Yeah, like so the characters in your story, are they kind of like winking at the camera in a way, for lack of a better phrase? Do you know what I mean? Are they self-aware that they're in a fantasy world, or are they kind of playing it straight, I guess? Do you know what I'm saying?
Playing it straight, I would say.
For the world that they're presented with.
To be fair, I think some people might claim that it's kind of video game-esque because there's an adventuring guild. But I always felt like if you're gonna have a universe that has lots
Like
of
it makes
monsters,
sense to be contracting people.
yeah, because like they would have like mercenary guilds, I think, or like mercenary companies. So like if you have a problem that's like specifically lots of monsters, it kind of makes sense that there would be a business around it and a guild,
Yeah.
Because it's like if you're like a farmer and you have a job, it's like, oh man, a chimera just ate my cow. It's like, are you gonna like, there's random strangers wandering on the road, and one's a wizard, and you're like, can you go kill that? And they're like, yeah, buddy, I want to give you some money. It's like, I kind of feel like you would want to go to the adventurer store and buy yourself a party or rent yourself a party to go do something.
Right.
If you were to give kind of the like a very brief synopsis without ruining anything, how would you explain the story of Horizon Quest? How would you describe it?
So the sort of like Link character is a druid who's just like finished his education with becoming a druid, and he's sort of disenchanted with just the idea of like sort of getting a regular job making money. He's like kind of looking inward and feeling like he's sort of lonely. Is like what he's the conclusion he's coming to, and he's kind of thinking of what he wants to do. In that kind of mindset, he wanders to an adventuring guild, and then he's just about to leave when he gets like dragged along on an adventure because an adventuring party needs a fifth member for the quest, because it's like there's a quest restriction, needs like this many because it's that dangerous according to the union or whatever. And then they go on a quest to go recover some magic staves, the shipment of magic staves that were lost.
Okay, cool. Is it comedic then?
Yeah, it's kind of a balance, I guess.
I always kind of feel like comedy and romance make a bad focus for a whole story. Like if you I probably wouldn't write something that's 100% comedy, because I feel like jokes and like humor make a good addition to a story rather than like the main focus. And I say that about like romance, having written a romance book. It's like I feel like those sorts of elements, and horror too, like scary stuff, I kind of feel like they all are good elements in fantasy rather than like the whole of it.
Yeah. So age-wise, is it all ages? Whatever.
No, not all ages per se. I would think it's like teen up.
Okay.
It's like YA if DCYA was good.
Right. Yeah. DCYA is terrifying. Yeah,
Yeah.
for all the wrong reasons. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I would say like middle school is probably a good like, that's like probably the floor sort of. But then like, I read it and like it, although I am biased. So, I feel like you could go up to what do they say, like 12 to 1200 or something.
Yeah, right.
Right. So how far along are you in the actual production of it? So the script is done, the art is mostly done, it's on the home stretch basically. So
Yeah, basically just doing
Yeah.
supplemental art. So like, just like the final touches like on the inside.
that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
Get it done first, and then well done. Hats
So
off.
finish the writing. How long you think that should take?
As soon as possible. Yeah, preferably, ideally, in a perfect world, you're on the home stretch already when you do the Kickstarter. So
Yeah.
good for you. You're doing it right.
The writing, there's one bubble I want to rewrite, but other than that, pretty much done, ready for like
And then
beta.
we'll just be like giving it to beta readers to get their opinions on it, see what we can change last minute.
So that's really cool. It's like when the book is done, then, or when the Kickstarter is done, there'll be a very short wait to the final release.
That's how it is for like basically all of my campaigns. I try to make it as short of a wait as possible because people just want it instantly when they're backing,
Yeah, and it's the energy too. It's like you get all that fun juice momentum built up from the campaign, and then it leads right into kind of releasing something, and that has to be really satisfying. Just going instead of like, okay, let's just put a big pause on all of that momentum and wait a long time, and then try and find
7 years.
Yeah, damn you. Yeah, so yeah, good for you guys for doing it right. That's great. So I see.
Sorry. It's just
I know I'm smiling, but inside I am just
screaming.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'm covered in scars that you can't see. But, yeah, the self-hatred is high. Yeah, it's crazy. But you guys are that's an exact example of how to do it right. I think Kickstarter is really tricky. Like I've had amazing experiences and terrible experiences crowdfunding, and I think it's a really tough thing to do. And I noticed that you're shipping. Are you focusing mostly on like digital copies? Is that kind of the main focus, is the digital stuff? You also have physical books as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are the physical books shipping internationally?
No, we kept it in all shipping we kept in the States.
Yeah.
And then for the international backers, we figured they could grab the digital for a little cheaper.
Yeah.
But we do want to do international shipping in the future. We're just looking for like the most cost-effective way to do it.
I would say stronger than we want, we will figure out international shipping.
Yeah.
That's smart too. I think it's really smart to just like what you're doing in pieces. It's like the worst thing would be to go way over into crazy land and then under deliver or find like roadblocks. So this is way smarter, doing it in doable pieces. How much time is left on the campaign?
Just like 12 more days, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
at time of recording.
Yeah, okay, so you got 12 days to go back it, which you might as well, so you don't forget, just go back it right now. If you leave the video, that's fine. Go back. Indie people doing cool stuff. Yeah, that's awesome. That's really cool. So you've done other campaigns before? Other Kickstarters for other projects? Is this your first comic work then, or you've done other stuff previously?
I have a couple of comics under my belt, I guess. Most most of them weren't quite super smash hits or anything, but you're building up bit by bit, and they're successfully a couple of successfully funded campaigns. So yeah,
that's great. So is it the same kind of stuff? Was it sort of manga fantasy influenced kind of work? The same?
Yeah, they're all like distinct from each other. Like obviously there's Ellie the Illuminator, which is like super cartoony for kids type thing. difficult to sell online. But then there's Sonic City Witch, which I did with another artist, and they kind of have their own kind of style, similar like anime-ish eyes, but very distinct from just being like a generic anime style. Then I did this other short comic at the beginning of this year. Actually, I finished that up and just put that straight on the website. Didn't bother crowdfunding it, so people could just buy it straight away. And then this one, of course, has been in the works for probably some of the longest time. So we wanted to do the campaign for that to get it funded.
And so, Adam, with your writing, you've written books, you've got work, you've got stuff that people can right now go and buy. Link will be below to all that kind of stuff. Go check it out. Yeah. So how many? I guess it's a tough question, I guess. How many things have you written? Because there's probably an infinite amount. How many in your bibliography, I guess, how many have you gone through the process of kind of self-publishing and putting out?
Yeah. So it's like, I think with like a lot of writers, me especially, it's like I have a ton of stuff that I've like written or half written and just haven't like gone through the like finishing process on.
Right.
But in my bibliography, like the books that I put out a collection of short stories as my first book. That was, quite a few years ago now. So it's like it was like 2015 or something. And then I put out a romance novel, which is like more recent. And then this is going to be my first fantasy novel that I put out. But I've written a lot of
first fantasy comic too.
First fantasy comic too, yeah. How hard is it to draw horses? We were just talking about that yesterday.
We were trying to figure out like what is the hardest animal to draw.
Yeah, Trisha did a drawing stream, and there was a bunch of people in the chat saying horses.
Yeah, horses. I kind of love drawing them because
I see you have horses over there. I wonder if those are like the aids to help you draw horses.
Yeah, right.
They are. There's these toys called Schleich toys, and I have a ton of them. And yeah, they're like drawing aids. There's a really good company called Anatomy Tools that makes anatomy models. They're over there. They're like these insane anatomy type things. They're unbelievable. And they do have a horse that I'd love to get. But until then, I've just got these little guys. But they're handy. They totally work. Yeah, I grew up on a farm, like riding horses and shit. So I'm kind of partial. I'm like a horse girl, I guess, in a way. But, what's the funnest and or worst stuff to draw? What's the most frustrating aspect of drawing? But also at the same time, what are some of the things that are the best that you enjoy the most?
Well, ashamed to say, I still struggle with hands. And like stuff like perspective, the more harder things. I'm just like recently figuring out how to do more environmental stuff and how to do more monster stuff, of course, doing like fantasy comics. And I guess like as far as like easiest or fun things that I draw, I love drawing expressions.
Okay.
I do. And hair, I guess. I like drawing like flowy things. That's always fun.
You think that comes from your brief stint studying animation? Do you think that's part of it?
That might be part of it, yeah.
It's kind of in there.
I was very big into cartoons, so of course I would love drawing the expressions.
Yeah, makes sense. Cool. And what about you, with Adam, with the writing? Yeah, writing is such a tricky thing. It's like so much more mysterious and elusive to me. I'm kind of in awe of people that are really good writers. And so I feel like it's sort of this ephemeral thing that I can't really get my head around. I feel like it's, tell me if this is right or wrong. Are there just words floating above your head that are just circulating in this miasma that no one else can see? And you just pull them out? How exactly, without asking, because I hate the whole thing of like, what's your inspiration? I hate asking that because it's why fantasy? Why are you drawn to just that entire genre? Because I mean, I see your t-shirt. I see what's going on.
Oh, Amon Amarth?
I've seen you wielding a flanged mace. So
He's got a whole
Oh,
weapon
man.
rack over there.
That's kind of an interesting question. That's I don't know. There's a lot to it that I really like. The sort of like heroism of it, the like the it's that's such a big question to ask. It's hard for me to like really nail down, like give a really concise answer why you like fantasy.
I know.
It's like almost like the perfect, like I kind of like history. Well, obviously I like history, but it's kind of like the perfect form of history because it's like more like epic in a way. It's like it takes all this inspiration from like European history, and then it's like, and then they add manticores and cyclopses and stuff. It's like,
Right.
It's
a really fun sandbox. You get the
yeah.
sandbox to play within. Yeah.
And then there's like other aspects. There's like, it's almost like a different thing to write for a party than it is to write for an individual hero. My novel is just, for the most part, like one character going through most of the chapters. And like the thing that's like missing from that is the adventuring party. And that's like this sort of kind of like ultimate form of like friendship in a way, because it's like they're all able to help each other, and they're kind of designed to help each other. Like the wizard can't be very buff physically because he needs his friend to help him with things that require strength. And that sort of, I don't know, it's like there's something really nice about that sort of camaraderie and like friendship that is part of a adventuring party. Even though it's a functional thing, they're doing a job together. They're like more than just like coworkers. They're like friends.
Yeah, and I think what the party makeup, that sort of that style also, I think, taps into the idea that each of these people in a weird way are part of our own psyche, and we all have a little bit of each of these different people, and so they're sort of manifest as it's like sort of this manifestation of different parts of our personality that come through. And
Yeah.
I don't know, there's something in there, like it's sort of like when you're playing D&D, and just the like what people choose to be and choose to role play as is a fascinating thing, because I feel like you can just really get at the core of somebody, because there's a lot of sort of kind of the subconscious coming out as far as who they really are.
Yeah.
The id.
There's also like nature is a big thing with fantasy too, because they're always exploring these like super fantastical locations. And with fantasy, you get the opportunity to make stuff more fantastic. You get to make these environments that couldn't normally exist. You could say magic or whatever. You can have higher mountains, and you can have deeper valleys. You can have like super tempestuous storms that are like exploding trees and stuff. It's
floating islands and
yeah.
Yeah, everything's kind of cranked up to 11, and I think that's why I like manga so much in a way too, is because there's no filter as far as that kind of stuff. Like everything is really over the top, and sometimes it catches me in a weird way. Like it doesn't hit with me right, but it's because it's so out there that I don't know how to process it. It could just be something like a weird character design or something that's just so goofy to me. But I've got all the biases built up that I don't have that open way of looking at stuff, because I'm filled with my own junk that's wrecking everything.
Yeah. So sometimes I think writers should be wary of that too, because there's a lot of like genre standard things where like, because you're writing fantasy, you can do certain things and people already know what it is. Like you can put it in an elf and people kind of assume they know what an elf is.
Right.
And then if you want to do something separate from like a normal elf, then you have to kind of explain that it's different. So there's like, you lean on a genre to just not have to explain certain things. Like they go into the adventuring guild, and I don't even know if we have a line that says it's an adventuring guild. It's just like, you know what it is because you kind of know fantasy. Right. And like you kind of, even if you didn't, you kind of would get caught up on what the building is for very quickly. People will recommend me a fantasy book, and then they'll explain the magic system first. And it's like, yeah, but like me as a writer, I hear people say that and I'm like, man, I guess I should have like a nailed down system. But from my perspective, it's kind of a crutch, because you don't need to make out specific rules for how much a guy can lift. a strong guy can lift a certain amount. And if a strong character lifts too much, people know, like people can tell it's too much and it seems so ridiculous. So it's like putting out these specific rules almost feels like an artificial way to make it feel balanced.
Yeah.
You should be able to write it in such a way that it is balanced and people feel like it's balanced without you coming up with rules that prove that it is balanced.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that doesn't mean I shy away from complexity. I feel like there's so much there that you could do with not just like what the spells are for, because you have like healing spells for support and you have damaging spells. There's so much you could do with the uniqueness of how characters store the energy that fuels the spells, how they recover the energy, and then like there's so much you could put there that you could never put into a game, for example, because like if you have different classes and they're all recovering magic differently, it starts to get too confusing for no reason, right, as far as like gameplay goes. But in a story, you get to have these characters that sort of function differently. Like the pixie is always animating a suit of armor, and that's because, from my perspective, she should recover magic very, very quickly, but can't store a lot of it. So she kind of puts a tax on her recovery by just putting it into moving the suit of armor. But she can't cast these super big spells because she can't hold that much magic at once. So she would cast stuff through items and stuff, like fill up a battery and expend it. And then you have the Astrid, the barbarian, casts these big, giant spells. And I kind of explain in the book why she casts the big spells instead of small spells. And it's like there's a lot you can do to make people feel unique from each other with magical systems.
I think people that DM are are they still called DMs now?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, people say GM because they want to get away from Dungeons and Dragons, so it's a game master instead of DM.
Okay.
Yeah.
I find people that like DM really well are natural storytellers, because you have to be smart and you have to be kind of juggling things in your head and know how to. And also, it's about like I always thought the best DMs are the ones that take. They realize that each character should have its own kind of story in a way, or not. Right. Try and engineer an arc somehow, try and pull it out, like embrace the character for what it is.
Yeah.
Try and navigate it a little bit. Do you think that has informed your writing? Like, because it's a weird thing to say that, like, okay, so you think about D&D and then you turn it into a book. But I've also read Dragonlance. And as a kid, I read a bunch of the Dragonlance books. And then I realized afterwards, or I read after, that was all based on a gaming session. And I was blown away because it was so good. So one of these things, like,
I would say when people base a book on a D&D session, they're not utilizing their creativity enough. There's so much, whenever you hear a true story, you could always improve it by editing it down and like changing details. Yeah. I would also say I'm a better player than I am a DM. It's just I'm like many DMs, I'm in the situation of like I'm the best out of my friends by a lot, and so they make me. But I would rather play a character.
I think you're a great DM.
Right, but I mean, like I have much more strength in character writing than like plot writing. But that's something I've improved over the years. It's just like naturally, I like for fun, I would rather have a crazy character in a campaign. But what I use D&D for is to workshop concepts and ideas. And like like you were saying, each player needs to feel like a hero and have this unique experience. I love to see what people feel like is very exciting for a character to experience, and then kind of make note of that and then use that later, especially when you're having a party all coordinate and win in a battle. You want to make sure that each character sort of has their own unique role and their chance to feel special. And the smile that you see on a player's face could be the smile on a reader's face who identifies with that character. I've had some sessions where I've had really well designed like boss fights. Like I ripped a Necrofex Colossus from Total War Warhammer's what is it called? The Vampire Coast. It's a big, like, basically a mech made out of a sunken ship with like the muscles from zombies used as the joints, like around gears and stuff. It's like the most twisted shit. Yeah, it's got a cannon arm. I just threw that into the D&D game, and then there was one guy who was really good at single target damage. He's like a warlock or something. So I put a sniper that was real dangerous with low health on the crow's nest on its head, and then he killed that, and he felt like the hero of the group. Then the mage has a fireball spell, and there's a bunch of zombies wriggling in its hull that like all spill out, and he fireballed them, and he felt like the biggest champion. And I was like, "You killed," and I counted out how many he killed. It made no difference, right? Because it's the same damage everywhere. It's like they all have one hit point. But I was like, you killed 34 zombies, and he felt so cool. And then the tank, was like taking hits on his shield, and I made sure I described it super like viscerally. Like the cobblestones beneath him are like belching out like the dust from the glue, the mortar between the bricks. And he's like, "Yeah, I'm a badass." And all that happened was I rolled 17 and hit 18 AC, and you could see him like enjoying that aspect of his character getting shown off.
It's also funny because the pixie in the suit of armor was a concept that you had in D&D, and then you ended up putting it in the Rising Quest.
Yeah, I have a huge pad of fantasy concepts that's just endless. I just spilling out of me. And there was someone who wanted to play as a pixie, but she also liked playing melee characters. And I was like, so I made up a character sheet when we started a new campaign, like the concept, and I explained it. And she was very, very excited, and she was a barbarian. So her version of the pixie was like, she had something like in Redline, there's that he puts like a crystal into the center console, and then it like does a super, super boost.
Yeah.
And I remember the player was playing as the barbarian pixie suit of armor thing, the Vera 0.1, if you will. She was like, "Oh, I want to enter a rage," but she wasn't that enthusiastic about it because it was like I felt like it didn't make sense or whatever. So I was like, "No. Here's what you do to enter a rage. You have how many?" I took her character. She's like 2 rages. Okay, so you take a potion and you like smash it on one of the glyphs on the inside of the armor, and then you go supercharged. And then she was like super excited about going into a rage. It was like a cooler concept, and seeing her excitement through the different parts of playing Vera was it was like it kind of informed me to what could be cool about that character. And then I tried out that character a couple times, and and like I sent in the group chat, I was like I quoted the session before she went into a rage, and then like sent the gif of the supercharge and stuff, and I was like, that excitement from people experiencing fantasy it helps me to kind of wrap my head around what is going to not just be exciting to me, but other people. It's like the ultimate playtest of story concepts.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's a literal playtest.
You tell someone, you speak the lines a character would say, and you look at people's faces, how they react to it, whether or not a villain is evil enough, whether they're scary enough, whether things piss them off. Other NPCs, you make annoying NPCs, right? And see what it takes to make a character unlikable. And then when people latch onto an NPC, I try to think like, what did I even do that made them so likable?
Yeah. And I one of the problems that like you're not going to have this problem because you get it, but I think some people who think that who use that as a device, like say playing D&D to then create a story off of that and sort of retell. It's like they had a really good night playing D&D and they go, "Oh wow, wasn't that fun? We should turn this into something." And then it's just like, okay, it was fun to you, but it's not going to be fun to anybody else. Kind of like, "Hey, you want to hear about my dreams?" No.
Yeah, right.
It's a data point. It's an important data point, but it's just one. Yeah, it's
exactly.
like when you get feedback at a workshop. There's 30 people in the workshop or something. Or I guess there's a lot smaller workshops, but like let's say there's like 8 people around the table. You get 7 feedbacks that are a certain way, and then you get one that's another way. If you pander to you have to be your own gate. Like you have to be your own decider of what is valid critique.
Like it's a different thing. Like playing D&D is one thing, a novel is one thing, and a comic is another thing. These are all very things.
Oh yeah,
they all do have story in common, and so it's a good way to playtest concepts and ideas, see what the responses are. Also, you're going to get different ideas too, because it's like the players are collaborative, creative, in a weird way, because they're also participating. So you're gonna be able to vampire some ideas off of them as well.
Yeah.
Maybe you.
And you can also see the order of ideas. Like when like certain concepts, I'll recycle them after doing other things. And so I can see what it takes to build people into liking something too. You can, because you're watching them, you're literally like sitting like say they have the book open, right? You're literally like, oh, you're over here being like what do you think about the book? Like you because they're talking as you're telling them the story, you get to like, it's just it's a useful tool. But yeah, I don't
Is that really quick in front of the camera?
oh, because yeah.
There you
I
go.
don't know if it's a first.
Yours. That's your book, correct?
Yeah, my first novel actually. It's a romance set in Disney World. Because my writing style was for short stories. Initially, I was like kind of inspired by like Andrei Sapkowski's The Last Wish, The Witcher stuff. And then I realized that my writing style sort of lacked this. It lacked some things that I wanted it to have, and so I kind of was for a while after I finished Leaves of the World Tree. I was like trying to. I was experimenting, writing a lot of things, and seeing how I could change my style so that it would incorporate more like descriptions, make the settings more lifelike and stuff. So it was, yeah. So my style changed into that, and then that was like it balanced some like sort of darker elements of like mood and stuff, like sort of like get the sort of roller coaster. But then with the fantasy novel I'm coming out with, I wanted to make it like super dark fantasy and then take advantage of that and have it go into really happy stuff. And it's like I tried to, so I feel like
roller coaster it.
Yeah, really like roller coaster, because I feel like really like edgy dark fantasy is just the perfect place to put contrast. And sometimes you read some dark fantasy or you play some like edgy games and they just don't have the contrast. They're not taking advantage of that thing. But when you listen to like metal or something, they have like super heavy parts, but then they contrast it with more symphonic parts and stuff. It's like,
well, it's why like I've been watching this like I think this is the second time I've brought up Septic Flesh while talking to you, but I don't know if you're familiar with Septic Flesh, but I take them, and there's this really great YouTube video of them playing live. I think they're like a Greek like super dark metal band, but they've got this live performance with a symphony, and it's exactly that. It's like really dark black metal goes really well with the softness of strings, and it's this kind of thing, and it's exactly that contrast. Like you have to, like all good art, you have to have, if it's all dark, there's no light. Like you have to have that balance. It's like on a position level, on a story level, on a character level, you have to have that. Otherwise,
all my playlists are like Septic Flesh, Nightwish, Satyricon, After Forever, just it's yeah.
So actually, that gets into the drawing stuff. What do you listen to when you're drawing? Do you listen to stuff? Do you have to like be vacuum, or so what are you able to work to when you're drawing? How does
yeah, it definitely, I mean, power metal is always like a winner, especially with fantasy stuff, like some Sabaton or Powerwolf, or sometimes I put on some Sonic music, whatever works to hype you up to whatever you're writing.
Sonic Frontiers.
Boss music, just like, yeah.
I heard the guy who draws Bleach, like it's a manga. He listens to specific songs for specific characters. Like,
okay.
I can see that.
He has a specific song. Someone was like recommending it to me. There's a specific song for like one of the more like aggressive characters. And so I'm like curious if it's like a heavier song for him, and then he listens to like some like, Claire de Lune for like the girls or something.
Right. Yeah. No kidding. Yeah, that's interesting. And it makes sense if it gets you in the mood. I find there's like some projects that like there's some music that I'm not listening to because I'm not working on the related project.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
when I get back to that project, then I can get to that music, and I'm really looking forward to it. Like, but it's sort of very specific kind of music that gets in the mood.
So my earliest like fantasy inspiration was just like playing the Elder Scrolls Oblivion like a million years ago.
Yeah.
And I like a lot of the time I spent playing the game, I was just kind of wandering and stuff. Like I remember a lot of time I would just spend like kind of sitting in some of the towns and just thinking about all these stories that I could write and stuff, just imagining all these stories unwritten. And it was like kind of, I always kind of felt this sort of pent up feeling. And then someone told me I should write, and I just took that as permission and did it, you know. And then it all kind of, it was, yeah.
Yeah, see, that's interesting. And there's something about like how quiet it is, and that whole thing where you just slow down and you listen to the music and you watch the sky. Like I can't think of any other games where I've done that really, where I've really just like gone and spent time in this world because it feels good. You know?
Yeah, Jeremy Soul music is just something else.
Oh, it's unbelievable. Yeah, he had this album called Northern Diaries, I think it's called. It's really nice. Like it's the same kind of thing. It's this very like haunting melodic. Yeah, it's so good. It's so good. How
I
can
gotta look into his music, I guess.
yeah, it's beautiful stuff. It's really good.
There's just something about like when you're trying to conceptualize a story in an environment, sometimes it's just good to pop open a game that has that kind of environment and walk around in it and just kind of get this sort of, even if you're not going to do an environment just like that, sometimes just seeing someone having already done it is helpful. If I'm trying to wrap my head around writing something, opening up a book is way, or listening to an audiobook is way more distracting than just opening up a game and then just turning the camera and looking around and kind of like observing and taking note of what I feel like is pleasant about the environment.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely. It's like when I was trying to get stoked to work on Hannibal again, which is like incredibly difficult because it's sort of this dark cloud over it. And it's hard to get pumped. I got to do it. So I find myself like going and watching like Rome. This like old, I think it's HBO. It's a really, I don't know if you've seen it. It's like there's 2 seasons of it, and it's fantastic. But it's these little kind of things to like re-immerse yourself in that world.
Yeah.
And then remind you why you love it and what you love about it. What would you say that Horizon Quest does that, say, DCYA doesn't do? How would you differentiate Horizon Quest from a lot of other stuff out there right now? What is it doing?
You won't hate the characters. Okay. You won't learn extremely bad lessons in life.
Yeah.
Okay.
Everyone earns what they get.
We're also not afraid of showing characters do things wrong. Like a mistake that some people make is when you're writing something, you have an infinite amount of time to make a character as smart as you possibly want. Like if you read something like Artemis Fowl or something, the writer spent a long time making sure he was always right about things and like he was smart in situations he had to be smart. And the longer you have a book in your hands, the more you're editing, the more you tend to make your characters a little smarter, a little better at stuff. And you start to see these mistakes they make, and then you think, oh, well, they shouldn't do that because that's a mistake. But really, you're not making perfect people, you're making characters. Yeah. And so showing them fail at things is important. And so like when I'm looking at the it's almost like to take it back to D&D, it's almost like metagaming when you're making the optimal decision based on your knowledge. Yeah, like when I'm like editing over the comic and I'm thinking of different solutions the characters could have, and then I have to think, would they think of that or should they think of that? Because this is a low-level party too. These are kind of, this is like sort of their first adventure together. And so showing a certain amount of incompetence or different things they don't think of, I think is important because they're not perfect.
Makes them people.
Yeah.
People. Oh, wow. So it's a story with people in it. Interesting. Yeah. What a novel. Yeah. Interesting. Okay, cool. Yeah. Well, that's different right there. They're actual human beings that are fleshed out with flaws. That's unlike basically everything out there right now. which are these weird Mary Sue type characters that
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
And not to say they don't have strengths either. They have things that they're very, very good at.
They're balanced.
And in order to really celebrate a character's strengths, it's important to kind of have them be bad at other stuff. Like to have a character that has these different things. It's like maybe it's just the German in me, but I really like a specialist. I like people who are people or characters that are really good at one thing and then also have a thing they're really bad at. It makes them feel more almost like fair in a way, or maybe realistic, you know. If you remember, I don't know if you saw Alita, but something that made that
I've seen it. I've been making, yeah, it's
you know,
it's a solid adaptation.
you could hold off seeing it and just like keep it as something you can look forward to. It's like there was someone who said they hadn't seen like Dredd, like the newish Judge Dredd or whatever, and it's like good for you. Like you have a thing to look forward to. You know, there was someone who said they hadn't seen Lord of the Rings. It's like that's one of those things that no, you got to see it. But you know, Alita, what made it unique was that contrary to a lot of like modern depictions of women where they make them like super unbearable to stand and then like perfect at everything, they beat her up a lot. Like,
oh yeah.
Like she's in a fight where she loses limbs. Like it's like a very, I mean, robot limbs, but you know, it's like they really like make
They did
her...
a good job at making the action scenes intense and, you know, making her cool, but then flipping it and making her feel helpless, you know?
Yeah.
To add the intensity, like you're worried for her.
Mm-hmm.
And that helps when it comes to like attaching yourself to characters.
The actress is good at portraying herself as vulnerable in the situation she should be vulnerable. So you feel this sort of protective sense. It's like they did a good job in making the character like, you know, you root for her because they balance it in such a way where she's doing bad and good that like she's getting better over the film, but you're still worried about her in these situations. You want her to succeed. And they do it not just like physically, they do socially. She gets embarrassed and things. It's always very striking when you see good writing. A lot of people have been complaining about horrible writing, and like being a guy who, you know, graduated with an English degree, I gotta say my classmates not good at writing, you know. There's no classes to learn about writing either. It's all writing workshops where you're depending on other students to teach you.
Yeah, it's a really difficult thing whether or not you can teach this stuff, you know, like artistic.
The most important skill is to edit your own stuff, like to be able to look at your stuff and tell if it's bad or not. That's the most important skill because you're going to be the most important judge.
Yeah, and it's also the trickiest thing to do too, because it changes over time. Like I always see it as a good sign where if a couple of years go by and then you look at old work, like you should hate it, you know? Like if you're not hating the stuff from like a few years ago, then you haven't grown and you haven't gotten better and you've just stagnated. So you should look back and be able to see flaws. And if you don't, then you haven't really developed. But yeah, it's a really tough thing because there's this whole, like whenever you throw the word art at something, whether it's writing or whatever, just anything under that big giant umbrella, then there's a certain amount of subjectivity that's allowed in. And it's really tough to know, like, I mean, yes, there's subjective things, yes, blah, 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 blah. But at the same time, it's like, well, where do you draw the line? At what point is something just crap and there's no talent there or there's no real ability? And I think so much of it is just like, do you have the mind of an artist? Because I think people who have never written anything before, they might actually have the mind of somebody who can. They just haven't gotten to it yet for whatever reason. Like is somebody who, like, same thing with like oil painting. There might be a really great oil painter out there who's never picked up paint, but they have the mind for it. And they just haven't gotten to it yet. So I don't know. It's this thing of like, where does it come from? Maybe this gets into the fairy talk. Like, are there magical art fairies? I don't know. But good writing is at this point shocking. Like it's shockingly rare, I guess. So when you do see it, you're blown away by it because we've gotten so used to just garbage media and garbage content that it's see something that's not garbage. It's
like How often do you get a review of something where someone's like, it's not that bad?
Yeah,
And it's like,
Yeah.
it's like my favorite saying. It's like, you're so used to eating shit, you're like, well, at least it's not diarrhea. And it's like, well, no, like I could just watch something good.
that's exactly it. Yeah. I
I don't
watched
know.
Renfield yesterday, and was it the greatest thing I've ever seen? No. Did I laugh? Yeah. Is it funny? Sure. Like it's good. It's entertaining. It's like a good like kind of goof of a hell like it's a Halloween classic. I think it's like an instant go-to funny Halloween movie. Um, uh, and the fact that it wasn't completely annoying and the characters weren't that eye-rolling thing, like it was actually kind of just a run-of-the-mill entertaining movie. Like that was enough for me to go, wow, big recommend. It's average +1, go see it. But like it's that bad. It's that bad. Like, and I mean it is it's good, but like the standards are so all over the place. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Sometimes you like read a thing, you're like, it was mediocre.
yeah.
Awesome.
Like, I love not Star Wars. I love Dungeons and Dragons because I was so hard up to see a good movie in the theater. Or I don't know. I don't know anymore because like you don't really have fun anymore watching a lot of movies in the theater because your critical mind is like seeing all of the box ticking and all this cheesy stuff that it's like
Yeah.
you're kind of like you're too cynical. You're ruined now. It's hard to
Yeah.
like.
And I don't think it's nostalgia either for like older stuff that was made. I think it's just like,
I mean, it's genuinely written better. When
yeah,
you break it down and like compare both of their styles, one is clearly better.
yeah. Like I was talking to my cousin, and he just like the movies that he watches, he just rewatches like 300 or Gladiator or like he's like, well, there's no good movies that are coming out, so he just kind of rewatches the good stuff he already saw.
Yeah.
So
Which I think that people should rather than just consuming the endless like poop shoot of stuff that's coming down,
mhm.
like even if it's not totally your thing, people should go to like say like look at the Criterion collection, and just see like find these lists of like even though they're lists and who can trust that, but like what are the top like movies of all time? What are these movies that are rated to be like the greatest of all time? Same thing with books. It's like even if it might not be your thing, at least check it out and see what all of the kerfuffle's about. At least go see why.
From my perspective as research, it's a good idea.
Yeah, I think it's like I think everybody should do that a little bit. Like, and like even on the comic side of things, I think that movies inform comics in a lot of ways just because of the storytelling, like the cinematic nature. And I could go on right now about like how manga comics fail miserably at good storytelling, but that might anger a lot of people. But it's true, and I think it's like a lot of manga doesn't have the same I guess cinematic, for lack of a better word, quality. Like some of the storytelling in manga I find just not particularly good, but they make
It's a hit or miss, I think, with a lot of them.
yeah, like Chainsaw Man. Chainsaw Man is infinitely cool, but I found a lot of the visual storytelling not that great, to be honest.
Yeah.
But it
I would
makes
agree
you
with you.
fox swagger. It's got so much swagger going on that it makes up for it completely. So
Did you ever read Understanding Comics by, was it Scott McLeod or whatever?
yeah.
That was the first time like reading that. It was the first time I noticed that manga has like a huge gap between the panels. I never noticed that reading it, but there's a big time difference gap between American comics and manga. There's a much longer distance between panels in manga, but I never noticed it.
Especially I noticed with like a comic called or a manga called Solo Leveling. There's
Oh yeah,
huge gaps.
I'm
Like,
on
That's
That's
a
Korean,
webcomic.
sorry?
It
It's
was a webcomic originally.
Oh, that explains it then. It's the formatting. It's formatting.
yeah, because it's supposed to be scrolled down infinitely. It's a Korean comic.
Okay, that explains why the book itself has this odd spacing. I didn't know. Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's also part of why I hate webcomics because of that damn spacing.
Yeah.
But isn't it?
Have you ever thought about doing a webcomic? Or have you technically?
I had done web comics before. I didn't really enjoy the experience, but you know.
Yeah, it's kind of like I don't know if there's a way for it to live properly right now. And what do you do with it after? Yeah, it's weird. I see a lot of this in YA, like they're kind of looking for content and they're pulling out these web comics and stuff. For better or worse, a lot of it like isn't my particular thing, you know, but I'm not I'm not on that side of Tumblr, I guess.
Yes. Speaking of, you were saying, I don't know if this was in one of our conversations or your video, how there's so much creativity coming out of like manga and whatever. You know, solo leveling is a necromancer main character. As a guy who's super into fantasy, I was shocked that they actually like went through with the necromancer main character. They cave though. He gets like he's super fast and stuff at some point. And he's fighting himself. But I was kind of impressed that they had it initially. It was a necromancer. He's raising people he's commanding and stuff. They don't lean into it. They go the super anime route where he's got to be like Goku. But you know, for a hot second there, the idea of a necromancer main character that's kind of not super common, right? Usually villains, because one character can have lots of strength.
I find whenever I play D&D, I always want to inevitably just go evil. Like whenever I play Skyrim, I'll start out doing just the big hero thing, but I'll inevitably turn into a mass murderer and just become a sick serial killer all the time. I inevitably descend into just being a monster always.
But that's super interesting. Necromancer by default evil from your perspective, right?
Yeah, but fun. Like same thing with Diablo. Is it Diablo? There's like necromancers in Diablo.
Yeah, you could be a necromancer Diablo too.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Like the last time I played Diablo, I immediately necromancer. It's like, yeah, for sure. I want an army of the dead and bones.
Is that because you're just like super metal or because you're evil?
Yeah, probably both. Probably mostly evil. It's more fun, and I think it's kind of it's that pure escapism thing, you know. So you just zig way over as far as you can, you know. You just go like all the way. So
I don't want to talk too much about it, but at some point I would like to do necromancer as a good guy. It's interesting because they function so differently than like other sorts of characters, because they themselves aren't the active role. They're commanding a unit that would then help their group, you know. Right. So putting them in an adventuring party is kind of interesting. In Dungeons and Dragons, they function horribly because their turns take so long because they're deciding each individual skeleton's movement, and it sucks the life out of an adventuring party in real life, unless you homebrew rules, which I've done once. But yeah.
They literally do suck the life out of things, though. That's the point.
Yeah.
I love vampires too, though. I'm a real sucker. Mm-hmm. I'm like an easy mark for anything like that. I just like, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's because I grew up in the 90s.
You ever
much Nine Inch Nails and The Crow or what, but like vampires are.
Did you ever play World of Darkness, like Vampires Masquerade?
No, I didn't.
You would love it, but now I wouldn't get the new edition. The new edition is super bad.
I think it'll flip around. I think we're kind of at the end of it, and you can always go independent.
I think so too.
You guys are doing, which more people should do. Do your own thing. Don't wait for other people to create the culture that you want. Go make it yourself. Yeah. Like you guys are doing, which is super cool. So everybody should absolutely back your Kickstarter. And while you're there, shop around and back some more. Or just like add on all the extras that you can get. Just like the more money you throw at people and fund people who are making stuff, the better everything gets. It lifts all boats, literally. And it's a
rising tides of all ships.
Yeah, right. Definitely.
Like I was saying, like when stuff gets better, like I want everyone to remember what it was like now. Yeah. Like remember going to the movies this year and then
being disappointed.
Yeah. So it's really cool to have people making stuff, you know, and stuff. So
yourself included, by the way.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. But we're talking about you guys. So yeah, everybody go and check out the links below, and you won't be disappointed.